Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole, King Dia, Lauren Frey, Grim Clover, Internet Blood Sports, City of Steel, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. So, Square Enix seems to be having a lot of problems this generation. People aren't talking about them because the evidence is just the evidence seems to indicate that like Square Enix is like very much struggling. Like Final Fantasy isn't selling as much as they used to. They're not producing anything else really, and they had to sell off their vast catalog of Western developers because they needed some quick change for NFTs. Things aren't looking good for Square Enix right now. So much so that I think they might be this gen's equivalent to Konami, especially when it comes to the Japanese market. Because a big thing back in the day was that like SquareSoft used to be able to sell people on consoles based on their releases. People would pick up a PS1 or a PS2 for SquareSoft RPGs, right? But that has kind of eroded over time to the point where nobody is going to buy a PS5 for a Square Enix game. Nobody's going to buy a PS5 for Tekken 8. Nobody's going to buy a PS5 for God of War Ragnarok or any of these samurai games or any of these Yakuza games. People are, I think, either buying a Switch or investing in a gaming PC because people are becoming disgusted with what PlayStation is doing with their properties and with their development studios. I I think Square Enix is in a bad position. They put their horse in the wrong race. Okay, they really thought that by siding with PlayStation, they would be able to drive Nintendo out of the console industry and dominate forever. But what happens? They go bankrupt within 5 years. They have to merge with Enix. They stop producing anything of value. All right, Dragon Quest releases slow down. Final Fantasy gets worse. They stop producing anything in their vast catalog of IPs. Like, that ActRaiser remake was shit. We never got an ActRaiser sequel. Like, we're talking about the Enix side of things, but uh, basically, what it all comes down to is over the years, Square Enix has kind of eroded their public reputation. So much so, it reminds me a lot of how Konami was viewed from like um, post Metal Gear Solid 3 up until like the the abandonment of their video game division, right? Which was a slow, gradual process. People will act like Kojima getting fired was like the impetus for this, but in reality, it was going on long before that. Like Team Silent got fucked. A lot of like the '90s developers got fucked. This is a company that was producing some of the best games ever in the '90s, right? In all sorts of genres, and then like all of that kind of eroded and just like fell apart like within the following decade, right? Um, in part because of like mismanagement, but also because of like supporting PlayStation over like the superior Nintendo hardware, right? That's kind of why Konami went downhill is because they focused more on like the PlayStation the PlayStation method of focusing on cinematics and story over graphics, over having like a high quality gaming experience that people could come back to over and over and over again, like Nintendo did, right? I find myself kind of shocked that despite how much I enjoy Metal Gear Solid 1 and 3, how little I've gone back to them over the years. I've been trying to get back into them for a long time, but it's been years since I played either, and it's just kind of strange to think that like I consider myself a fan of these games, but just they're just not as nearly as good as people made them out to be. Like when they first came out, people were saying they were better than Zelda or Mario, but in the end, they really weren't. And I think we're seeing history repeat itself with Square Enix, where they're refusing to release new entries and beloved IPs. They're refusing to kind of do anything. Final Fantasy has gone off the rails, and now what we're seeing is that they're going to try and court the PC gaming audience. They're making deals with Epic. They're doing things with Steam. They're trying to get Steam to take off in Japan in the next couple of years, so the Japanese will buy Final Fantasy 16 on Steam. Yeah, forget actually developing Final Fantasy 16 for the platform that the Japanese actually use. Square Enix are right now trying to train their audience to download Steam onto their PCs purely so they have something to play Final Fantasy 16 on. Like, this is the thing people don't understand is that, like, Square could easily just fix all their problems by just producing a bunch of Nintendo Switch games. That's it. All they had to do was just, oh, Final Fantasy Switch is the best, most popular console. Fine. Final Fantasy 16, it's a Switch exclusive. Okay, that's all they had to do. 17, Switch exclusive. Like, I don't understand why they pretend like it's some impossible thing to continue developing Nintendo to develop for Nintendo hardware. All of these developers do this. Like the Yakuza devs are becoming notorious for it, but I think Square Enix is like just as bad because there really fundamentally was no reason for them to like abandon Nintendo hardware the way they did. And we are finally seeing the chickens come home to roost. We are finally seeing the results of their actions speak for themselves. They alienated their audience, they alienated their fans, they fucked over the developers, and what do they have to show for it? Absolutely nothing.